So hello to anyone who is watching this, because how else could I say hello during this? This is Bob Coppage, CEO, Simplex-IT, Crotch the Old Geek, and we're here for the latest episode of BizTech Twists. And I can't get twistier. I simply cannot get twistier than Tony Francisco, CloudPlus CEO. Tony, you want to say hello and whatever else you want to do about who the heck you are?
Tony Francisco, CEO of CloudPlus. I essentially invented multi-tenant Microsoft Exchange, hosted Exchange back in 2003, made my mark, and since then have been drinking a ton of tequila, hanging out with really smart people, which happens to be here, and along the way, some that don't quite fit that description. But the good news is we've been learning so much. I think we've been spreading as much of the experience that we've kind of gathered. We're like the little honeybees, cross-pollinating across the board. And that's why I'm here. We're going to start sharing some ideas, ideals, philosophies, and possibly some traumas, of which I've got my PTSD therapist right down the hall.
I used to have a gerbil.
So here's what I don't understand. I know that sarcasm is your free service that you provide. And I thought I was charged for your humor. Like, I don't understand. Like, now you've got me confused. Do you?
Well, but see, here's the thing is it's kind of like you can repurpose any conversation you want to. Okay. Mm-hmm. So there are other people who will listen to this conversation and basically go, oh, okay, Tony went that way and got sarcasm. So if I went a different way, I might. So you're kind of serving as a poster child on how not to talk with me.
That is a good point. And for those who didn't understand that, consider me the lightning rod for the abuse.
Yeah.
And let's go.
Absolutely. but here's the thing, and this is where the conversation that we're going to have kind of came from, is Tony is actually understates his ability, and I hate saying this because it's almost going to come off as a compliment, or they're like, but is really good at essentially looking for that different approach to common themes, common thoughts, and all of that kind of good stuff. And that's something it's just so freaking rare, and it is so frequently misused. Someone will take a different approach. No, not everything can be solved with ostriches. Believe me, I've tried. But to look at perspectives, because there's so often, especially when we're so saddled with all of the memes and all of the here's my solution, and everything can be solved with a 40-word solution and the like. And you know better, and equally you're not afraid to bring that up. And the difference between us is you bring it up in a positive way. I just bring it up.
So I have some. So there was a meeting that I had sort of a long time ago. We had the executives, and I mean the top line executives from. Do you remember when Microsoft was possibly going to purchase Yahoo? If you remember, so this is 2006, so we had Yahoo executives, Microsoft. I was the only one that was not able to make the Seattle trip, but I had my CTO there at the time, and so I'm on speakerphone, and everyone's spending more time trying to keep their job than doing their job.
Yeah.
And so since we had a hard stop, I said, hey, listen, guys, I'm just going to call this out, because I was definitely the small man in this environment. And I said, since I'm the only one that's not going to lose my job here, and a lot of you are spending more time keeping your job, trying to keep your job than doing your job, I'm just going to get the turds out on the table. I've got 5 more minutes until I have a hard stop. So there are 3 people need to sign this doc. I'm one. I'm just wondering, do we have another one, or is this kind of a no-go? There was the most awkward. And when I say awkward, it was one of those like out of a movie awkward, that was exaggerated awkward, 4 count. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, laugh. Now, the person that laughed was clearly away from the sphere. He was in the back of the room. The moment that person laughed, everyone got the weird cue that it was acceptable to laugh. Then everyone started to laugh. And I said, whoever that was in charge. And that person was, oh, Tony's right. Okay, then we'll move forward on the partnership. And it went forward smoothly. But one of the statements that I made was brought up repeatedly after that meeting. Tony, when you said, let's just get the turds out on the table, all of us were in shock, but it was so applicable because it wasn't that offensive, but it was right on that line. I'm like, that's where I live. I live right on that line, mostly because I'm trying to get back because I stepped way over the line. I'm trying to, I'm almost back into the politically correct or palatable area. But yes, that's what I like to do. Get turds out of the table.
Yeah. And the neat thing is that I've got a similar story with Steve Ballmer that I went over the line back in 98, I think it was, at a meeting. But we'll save that for another.
We're totally dating ourselves right now.
Oh, my God. Because no one else will date me, and that includes my wife. But that's a different story entirely. But you bring up an interesting point, is in some cases that we are in a different perspective. And because of that, we're in a position, whether it be a professional, personal, whatever, but we're in a position where our goals and objectives are different. And also we have the freedom because we don't have the power. So we can actually put the turds on the table. We can actually say, and I actually had one similar last week, not a turd table incident, which, by the way, there's a website coming out of that somewhere. I don't know what it is, and I don't really think I want to know. But that's where I'm going to say the thing that no one else is saying. I'm going to basically bring up that factor. And in some cases, it's because the role that we play in that project, in that situation, is a different role, or the experience we give. So in a lot of cases, we're both in the technology business, but sometimes it's a CEO question. So it's more of a management. Other times it is more of an end user perspective. Other times it is a whatever. And the same thing for any organization. You may find yourself in a situation. I was in one where a majority of people were economic development coordinators for municipalities. And I was the only vendor, and they were talking about how do you bring companies in? And I basically said, look, I'm one of the people that you're actually trying to bring in. And most of the things that you're talking about are essentially coming out with a hard-hitting editorial that I'm in favor of puppies. It's so incredibly safe and therefore so incredibly not valuable, not unique, no value proposition. And the like, but no one was willing to actually say that, to put there, shall we say it again, because you can't say it enough times, turds on the table. And is it a risk? Yeah. But it's a bigger risk organizationally, or to whoever that group of people is. It's a bigger risk to just let it sit there and not be dealt with.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe the situation is going to drastically alter the statement, but I'm of the belief that people do business with other people, and that relationship means everything. People do not do business with email. They do business via email with little simple messaging and text message, et cetera. But you have a relationship which is usually based on a history. In my case, the history is usually, I don't know, a comedy, or there's some tequila involved in there, and laughing, and
yes.
I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing near you, but it doesn't matter. That's still history. But people do business with other people. And because of that relationship, I'm of the opinion I would much rather say too much than not say enough. And when you don't say enough, now granted, if you don't have that relationship, then it alters the situation. But if you don't say enough, then there are, I think you're just leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. If you have a relationship, if you have that connection, you are amplifying the possibilities, because I say I'm a noodle flinging machine. So you throw noodles against the wall, see what sticks. I'm just throwing all kinds of stuff out there. It may be that 90+% of them are absolutely worthless, but there may be something that could be evolved. And by that discussion, you are going to potentially have a win. But of course, you're going to have quite a few losses and failures. And I think that's probably one of the things we're going to talk about today.
Okay. So first we're talking about turds. Now we're moving on to noodles. Okay. No, I get this. This is good. But I'm going to push back on one of those statements where I don't think that all people deal all professional relationships as relationships. There are some people who do business by email, or there are people who will do business in certain categories by email. And I think that we have, when we are the relationship based, and you always hear that relationship versus transactional, it's this versus that. And I truly think that you can't simply say that everybody else is going to be one way or the other, because you're going to have some people who are totally relationship based, other people who are totally transactional based, and other people who are truly a mix of it. When we talk about successful careers or relationships, the person who is relationship based generates relationship based business. That's where they succeed. The person who is relationship based, who tries to build transactional business, is going to have challenges. It's not going to go well, regardless of their messaging and attempt. It's just square pegs round holes, and vice versa as well.
It's engineered. I mean, you have engineered obsolescence in your strategy or your process. And I think that's what people see. And people really, really, really struggle with any measure of failure. And just for everyone out there, the email that I got from Bob, I just love this. My thoughts are we should talk about failure, losing, and quitting, and wherever else it goes, which is such a dangerous thing to email me. That is the worst thing. Just
I can email you worse. Oh yeah, no, I can. Not sure I will, because at this point you'd expect it.
Touche. That's a good point.
But a year or so.
Let's talk about failure. We've got so many things to talk about. I mean, failure. What are we talking about? We're talking about stories. Are we talking about philosophical? The structure of failure.
But see, here's the thing: is when I decided to do this podcast, I didn't want to put any kind of real framework on it, and just basically have it where we'll which is so wrong. Seinfeld was not a show about nothing.
It wasn't.
It really was. It was a show about characters who made a big deal out of small things.
That's a good point. I like that.
So it was never a show about nothing, but they said it was. And they really branded that terrifically, because that message that went out that said, hey, we've got this great thing. That's just on every freaking comedy show was that way, relatively speaking. They just messaged it much, much better. That's what I'm saying.
Let's make something big. Let's make something big about this. I don't know. Doug, when you said failure, the very first thing is I went through and I thought philosophically, how do I handle failure? And then I reached back a little bit further and thought about my own personal failures and my failures, which are
we don't have that kind of time.
Exactly my point. It's an extremely long list. I mean, the internet would break and they're mostly public, and it's just wildly embarrassing. But the one thing that I kind of go back to is that when everybody's looking for this, they have this constant search for a level of predictability, and which I admire, by the way. I totally respect that. But when you have this weight, everyone starts off with this weight of failure on your shoulders very young, because you failed at some point as a child.
Right.
And yet most people pretend that doesn't exist, and they're not ready for the next time it comes again and again and again and again. And that experience is typically a thing that you get when you didn't get what you want originally. And so if you look at the experience, which ironically goes back to the history, which ironically goes back to tequila, it's always coming back to tequila. And
you never left tequila, okay?
That's a good point.
Yes.
Hold on, I got to take a sip. If experience is typically a thing that you get when you didn't get what you want, and you ever listen to somebody that has a lot of experience, you can guarantee that their list of failure is so extensive and in a lot of times embarrassing, but that helps them omit the things that they shouldn't do. And eventually the wise old human can name that tune in one note, because they have failed so many fabulously, amazingly horrific times that they can now say, oh, don't do that. I've done that before. Don't do that. I've done that before. But when you look at failure as a whole, think about all the times. And I actually did a TEDx on this a long time ago, where it talks about who we are as a sum of all of our past experiences. And if you went back in time right now, could go back and undo any of the failures, you would not be the person that's listening to this right now, you would be a completely different person in some aspects, because that could have been a keystone to an avalanche of other items that it evolved from. So that failure, the bad relationship, the time you didn't get the job or the promotion, the deal that didn't go through, the time that your car was a horrible purchase choice, whatever it may have been, taught you something, and that is experience. And at the time, it was horrific. You've moved on since then. You've built so much more past that. So I'm curious as to what your definition is of failure, because I'm of the opinion that every failure is actually a success. You just don't recognize the value of it at the time.
So I really don't care.
I just went through this massive philosophical framework, and you're like, yeah.
No, I mean, from the standpoint of, it is one of those where a failure is what it is. It's what you make of it. It's what you do next. It's the, why did it matter to you? It's up to you how to, first of all, you have so many of us out there who will completely avoid the acceptance of failure, we will look for, we're not going to look for lessons, because lessons are for losers. We're going to look for excuses. We're going to look for blame. We're going to look for ways to get back, revenge. We're going to look for all of those kind of things, as opposed to, well, that didn't work. Now what? And so to me, and I honestly, I agree with you more than I care to admit, from the standpoint of, there's lessons from everything. If you don't go through a day without coming up with some kind of lesson or another, I don't want to say it's a wasted day, but there's a good part of it, or tequila. But it's one of those things where we have to build on our brand, our personal brand, professional brand, however you want to do it. And all of us are looking to do that in some way, shape, or form. And if you can't take failures and move forward from those, you're missing out on one of the best resources. And also, you can't immediately go, failure is a complete negative. Failure is not necessary, because there are some things that you failed at right now, but had you kept at it, you could have kept trying. How much of Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter is about, don't learn from, bleeding head bad, healed head good. Don't learn from that. Just keep at it. Keep trying. Sooner or later. Or, no, this was a bad idea. This isn't going to work out. This isn't going to. And to, brand it with failure, brand it with lessons learned, brand it with whatever. But now what? Now what's the next step? And I just think that the concept of failure has just gotten such an overwhelmingly negative, not only from our internal perception, but from others' perception of us.
Do you think, that first point of that, that internal perception, that the catharsis that occurs internally, where you're doing the constant internal audit, I would challenge that I would emphasize that the lens that you're looking through has been drastically altered by social media and the framed perfection out there. Look at all these people with this amazing ex and their amazing family, and their what's happening? My dog's throwing up on my lap while I'm driving in the car. I'm trying not to hit, as I pull over, I'm like, my kids are beating the snot out of each other in the back seat. But guess what? For a fraction of a second, I will take a selfie and then post that. And people say, you have the most perfect family. Oh, no. I have an extraordinarily normal, average family, which means we have excessive amounts of entropy, unregulated chaos. And we have what I consider to be core pillars. And the core pillars are, don't kill yourself. Don't kill others. Try not to lie to mom and dad so much. or do a better job of it. Well, there's many attempts, many.
Oh, seriously.
So, but I'm really fascinated by the lens that people look at themselves, and they they want to quit because they see the perceived perfection out there. I want to remind, tailing on what you said, I want to remind everyone it's really not over when you lose, and you will lose, and you will lose, and you will lose, and you will lose. It's over when you quit. That's when it's over. Okay. So
unless you quit something because you're going to go do something else.
And I think that's the part where people actually get upset. And in the business world, that's called pivoting. That's called, necessity is the mother of invention. Hey, this isn't working. This is not going to be sustainable. I am going to pivot over here and look at how amazing I flourish. That is not a loss.
Right.
That's you forcing an evolutionary process. And that's a massive win. So I can go off on a tangent about that alone, but it's not over when you lose, it's over when you quit. And by moving, by pivoting, by changing, by altering your decision, by evolving it, that's not a loss.
Right.
That's literally the definition of life. You're living and you're moving on.
And it's not just for individuals. You could have organizations that would go through the same thing. You take a look at, for example, Sears. Sears was just absolutely nailing it on the mail order, the catalog sales. And then they pivoted and started opening stores. And they killed it. Did absolutely fantastic on that. Did absolutely wonderful. And then they started getting into financial investments and all that. And they were actually killing it there.
They were doing good there.
But their stores started going down the tubes. So what did they do? They sold their successful new businesses, their financial businesses, to feed and to continue feeding their stores. So they didn't quit, pivot. And by the way, that story is one from a really good book called Quit. That is from, I forget her name. She's the poker champ author. I'll think of it in a moment or put it in the comments. But it's a great example because organizations will go through the same thing.
What about people that are self-defeated? So, for example, for those of you who don't know, I normally am shaved smooth. This is the longest my beard has ever been in honor.
You do look like a hippie.
This is like literally. This is about 8 weeks of growth, and itchy is not the right word saying this. But as I get older, I start to feel the impact of age, and I'm hearing from my peers, I can't do that. I'm getting too old. What I did is I actually copied and put some notes over here. I just want to remind everyone this because for this podcast, I said, someone's been bringing up the age. It's been brought up more than a few times in the last week. Charles Darwin was 50 when his book of The Origin of Species came out. 50. He's like, 50. I'm going to write a book and do that. I'll write this book. Go. Charles Darwin, may have heard of him. Da Vinci, as in Leonardo, not DiCaprio, 51 years old when he painted the Mona Lisa. Process that. Abraham Lincoln was 52. And back then, that's like you being like Biden's age. Like he's old. Like he's I mean, that is old. Let me see. Ray Kroc was 53 when he bought the McDonald's franchise and made it what it is today. Dr. Seuss was 54 when he wrote Cat in the Hat. Like you look at all this stuff. I am fascinated. And that's the 50s. It goes on through the 60s and 70s. Age is not the issue. It is the lens that you're looking at things through. And I pointed out the social media because that blurs your vision, that dilutes your potential, your self-perceived potential. And I want to remind everyone of that because again, I look at people when everyone goes through hardships, and I don't mean to go off and around on this, but when I see people that went through a failure in some capacity, everything from a business that they didn't pivot in time, or a divorce, or a job that wasn't fired, whatever the deal that fell through, I look at them in the eyes and I say, listen, what I see right now is a poor shadow of your actual potential, and that, and I know that, and I look forward to seeing you in full color. So you have to decide, when is that going to be? And there's a weird moment of, damn it, you're right. Like, this is just a part of a process. This is not an event. This is just a part of a process. And I'm in the very beginning of that process, and I have to get through the process. When the process is over, I'm moving on to other opportunities and potential wins. So I want to remind everyone, really, really evaluate the lens that you're looking at yourself through and what that failure or the gradient of failure actually is in the big picture of things. So,
are you fed up with reactive IT providers who take too long to respond, let problems fester, and nickel and dime you for every little thing? Say goodbye to those frustrations by choosing Simplex-IT, home of Amazon's best-selling author and BizTech Twist host Bob Coppage. As Northeast Ohio's friendly neighborhood MSP, Simplex-IT has been providing top-notch managed and co-managed IT services since 2007, supporting hundreds of clients locally and across the United States. With a managed service provider like Simplex-IT, you'll benefit from proactive maintenance, 24/7 monitoring, and streamlined technology that will help you grow your business. Visit simplex-it.com for more information and to start experiencing stress-free IT today.
The other thing I would say that I use a lot is the concept, and actually did an earlier podcast with Matt and Lee talking about this, is the concept of infinite game versus finite game. Because life is an infinite game. It doesn't have an end. All right. It doesn't have fixed players, fixed rules, fixed goals and objectives, fixed scoring, fixed winners and losers, and all of that kind of fun stuff. And we so often think of whatever just happened. We won. Yay. So we're done tomorrow, right? Or we lost. Therefore, we will never be able to do anything again. And again, some of the wins are epic. Some of the losses are epic. But they're rarely the end of the story, the end of the game, the end of the process. By the way, the only comment I would give about the age and when people started is when Mozart was my age, he'd been dead for 30 years.
You just broke my brain. That was more than a double negative. Like that was that was like. I don't even like the conjugation of, hey, give me a present, future, past tense statement. By tomorrow, I will have been pretty happy by what's happening now. What? So by your age.
When Mozart was my age, he'd have been dead.
Amadeus.
Been dead for 30 years. And actually, I can't take credit for that statement. That was actually a statement made by and this guy's name I remember.
ChatGPT.
Yeah. No, I'm waiting for CatGPT, which is going to be a cat-based AI system. It's going to be kind of weird. It will not respond to anybody.
It's a cat. But yeah, that's really funny.
Yeah. No, it's actually Tom Lehrer was the guy who did this, who's really interesting. And by the way, Annie Duke was the author of the book Quit. It's actually a really good book about kind of
nice.
Yeah. About this topic. But the other thing is that what is, how do we choose to view this? How do we choose situationally? How do we choose strategically as to view this moment in order for us to basically say, do we have a choice? Do we pivot? Do we take this? And yada, yada, yada. And it's one of those where just like it's not a social media moment. It's a personal moment. It is a moment that you have to, or it's a personal moment for your organization. It's a whatever. And the other thing is that it also should not be something, and I think way too many people, they won't even consider the possibility of failure until it is thrown in their face. When somebody comes to me and says, hey, I've got this great idea. We're going to do this. It's going to be this fantastic. It's going to be great, whatever. Okay. What if you're wrong? What's going to happen? And if there's,
do you consider that a strength? So I'm trying to be the devil's advocate a bit.
I can give lessons if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, full circle back to the beginning. I really like it when Tony does this. Shut up, Tony, you're wrong.
That's the part I like the most.
So when people said, hey, multi-tenant exchange and private label hosted services and hosted service distribution platform, click to provision, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm doing something right now called the Universal API. And when I came up with those things originally, people said, Tony, that doesn't exist. And I go, yet. I would always say yet. And well, Tony, you can't just, it doesn't exist. Like you can't do that yet. And that fearless, there's no failure, no possibility of failure. That was a strength to me, and it really empowered me from a variety of things prior to that, to be so confident with that level of ignorance. Mm-hmm. So the confidence in my ignorance was devastating to some, but it was in a sense of power. But what you're saying is that it doesn't register to people, and I would challenge that it could be a very, very big, large source of power. But in most cases, without the experience, and translation full circle back to the beginning, without the multitudes of failure, right. in amazing fashion, you're going to probably do something that you didn't really calculate as well as you should. And what you're saying is that you're saying, hey, from my experience, X, and they're the simplest of the calculations haven't been done yet. Is that what you're referring to?
It's a combination of things. It is one of those where anytime you hear, whether you talk about a business plan, a personal development plan, a growth plan, anything along those lines, there are always assumptions. There are always these assumptions that the following things I am correct about, or that the following market forces, the following technological forces, the following lack of competition, because we're going after blue ocean, we're not going after red ocean. All of those things are going to happen. And my question is, okay, that's great. If all those things happen, that's wonderful. What if they don't? Whether you're talking about, let's say, if you're looking for investors to put money in, at what point would you say we don't need to put more money in because this isn't going to work? Or if you've got key partnerships, at what point are you going to say a key partnership isn't working? And I'm not looking necessarily to say you have to have it completely fleshed out. But I've said this many times before in other circumstances. The worst time to learn CPR is when you're having a heart attack. Okay. Similarly, the worst time to consider an emergency or a bad situation is when that situation is thrust upon you. So what are your plan Bs? What are your exit strategies? What are the circumstances at which you will say, if this happens, we're not necessarily going to quit, but we know that something bad is going on.
I want to reshore that the reference point about learning CPR when you had a heart attack, emergencies, like, hey, prepare for the emergency. What was about the emergency statement? You said
if you wait for the emergency to be happening.
So both of those statements are from some semblance of experience. Now, maybe they're firsthand, maybe they're like witnessed front row, maybe they're just from research enough to where you can correlate the data. But what you're saying right now is you're foretelling you're spreading some real wisdom by the very failures that have occurred.
We'll call it wisdom. Yeah, we're spreading something. We'll call it wisdom for now.
Yeah. I talk about. I've been talking about this quite a bit lately, where humans are one of the only animals, organisms that have the ability to mentally time travel. And what that means is, and people really, they struggle with that definition, is that you have the ability right
except
now.
Gerbils. Gerbils can do it. They can do it.
Where did gerbils come? There's so many gerbils.
I don't
know. Humans have the ability to immediately think ahead and think, what if I walked in with red stockings? What if I wore a complete ski mask and walked into that store? Or the looks? You can literally construct the visualization, even the emotional response of individuals. You can go all the way down to the color. You can, at that time, you've just fast forwarded time, you can swap out different points of the configuration and see the reaction accordingly. You can also do the same thing in reverse. You can rewind time and go back in time. What if I did this? What if I did that? And that ability to foretell a possibility, to quickly build, rebuild, and break down and identify areas of inefficiency, identify the best, most likely path to remediate a situation or the most efficient path to resolution. That is a unique quality in humans. And here's the unfortunate part of that. Some people don't have the ability to do that. Some people have the ability to do very, very small scopes of that. Some people have the ability to do very dramatic, very large and detailed, down to the emotional response of multiple individuals, and deconstruct and reconstruct those configurations very rapidly and come up with those conclusions. Some people need a long time to do that exact same thing. Anyway, I'm just pointing that out because you're one of the, unfortunately, the latter, that you can just kind of figure that out and then move on, and you make it look easy.
Well, okay, I got 2 points for that. Or not, I don't get 2 points because they're not keeping score because I already won. But the first thing is that I think everybody has the ability to do that, but most people do it for entertainment purposes. It's going to be so cool when this happens. Oh man, I'm gonna go to that meeting and I'm gonna do this presentation and they're gonna love me and they're gonna sign up. That's just what's gonna happen. That's it. Oh, maybe they'll hold a parade. Maybe they'll give me an award. So I just want to go through all these situations where I get to be this wonderful hero, this great thing, or equally, I'm going to suck. It's going to be horrible. There's no way.
Some people do that.
Exactly. But so they're using that power, that temporal mix, and the same thing for going back in the past. Oh, I was so cool today. I just rocked it. I killed it. I was fantastic. Or similarly, I was so horrible. So in both cases, we're using it as just a different version of Netflix, with very few thumbs up.
That's really funny. Just rewinding. It's our old 70s and 80s version of Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
The books,
exactly.
The format.
But it's one of those where we're not using it in the way that you're talking about, which is okay. What can I do? And the second point I wanted to make is actually, I'm going to get a little personal here, but talk about from the Asperger standpoint. Okay, I can't do these interpersonal conversations and all. I do not have the skill to do that. So one of the things I do a lot is to actually have conversations in my head before I have them. I will actually walk through. Here's the decision trees, and I've learned to just do that. And so you name it. You and I have had several interesting conversations at conferences. Okay. Because I know your personality well enough and I know you and I are going to talk. So, okay, what's going to happen if this, and you've even picked up a couple times that I am right there with a couple of smart ass responses to you. But it's actually because I've already rehearsed them in my mind. That's one of the best ways I have as a coping mechanism. I try
to deviate, but you are like a sniper, just waiting and wait. There it is. Boom. And right. I fell into his trap.
and that's because I've already thought those ways through, because I have to, because otherwise it is literally yes, huh? So that's one of the mechanisms, which gave me that superpower, if you will, to be able to talk in most professional situations. It's a huge energy drain. I can't begin to tell you. And yet here I am beginning to tell you. But it's one of those where I have, because I will do that because I kind of have to already. So I can do that extrapolation, but also walk it through different paths. And that's why I'm saying one of the key things that I think we need to do a better job of is that what if. What happens? At what point do I say this is a failure? At what point, what metadata do I need to look at? So I can guard, not so I can say, oh, I'm going to fail, or this is horrible, or anything along those lines, but so that I'm forewarned and it's not the first time that I'm looking at a circumstance or a situation.
So when you tell someone the unfiltered truth and they are unable to comprehend failure, or they choose to ignore it, are we coming to the conclusion that people's inability to process unfiltered truth has little to do with their ego in comparison to their inability to intellectually comprehend the resolution? Or are they cognitive dissonance is the only, you kind of throw it all together. Are they innately just saying, I am not willing to face the reality that this individual is telling me, and then they almost can turn you, they can almost demonize you and turn you into, why are you, how did you just tell me I have a booger in my nose or I have bad breath? I can knock a buzzard off a wagon. I don't know if I can say that. But how dare you tell me something that would actually be for the betterment of me? I got to demonize you. I'm really interested to.
Well, I think
it's your opinion.
It's a combination. I think you can't stereotype everybody, but I think you have that. First of all, we have to recognize the fact that you think I'm going to fail versus you want me to fail. When people hear challenges to their plans, or I think there's a natural tendency, especially again, social media, yada, yada, yada. And I also think that, and this is part of the reason why I do the crotchety old geek thing, is I tell, hey, I'm the crotchety old geek. I tell it as it is. I'm sarcastic. I do all that. So nobody should be surprised when that's actually the way that I'm going to communicate with people. And you've heard me in meetings where I'll basically try to put a little bit of humorous sugar in it.
You make me cry laughing. You make me cry it's the burn that keeps burning way after you leave. Way after you leave, I'm like, oh my God! I just realized the other sarcasm. It like just keeps giving. You didn't understand. You didn't catch any of that. Okay. Okay. And then I say to people, I go, listen. Aside from his obvious and astonishing limitation, Bob is smart. He's great, he's smart, so much. And I know right now inside your soul is crying because what he said to you is now starting to take effect. But trust me, there's a point where you'll laugh at it. You become comfortably numb with the humor. Remember, sarcasm-free humor you have to pay for. It's very important you understand that about it. It takes Venmo. That's the one thing I tell everyone. Sorry, my poor attempt at humor.
No, it was adorable. But it is one of those where that can be a great tool as long as there's a difference between, humor that is self-deprecating and I can trash you till the cows come home. You got an ego a mile thick. It supports it. It works well, all that. There are other people who I know I can't do that with. And so I try not to. So you try to make it so that you're adjusting appropriately to the audience. But at the same time, you also talk to people and getting back to your question, in some cases, they don't want to look at what the risks are, what the challenges are. In some cases, they only think of it in terms of you're not helping me prepare for something, you're telling me something. So it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy or anything along those lines. And I really do think to a certain degree, if the conversation immediately turns into, well, let's talk about how you're going to fail, or if you're going to fail, or the like, to instead, and this is building on something you've been saying, is to say, it's funny because, this is my fourth, Simplex-IT, that's my fourth company. Let me tell you about the first three. And the only way you're going to hear about them is me telling you, because they all crashed and burned spectacularly. And in some cases, I wasn't ready for that because I thought everything was going to be fine, blah, blah, blah. And then you can kind of get into that, I'm going to parable. I'm going to tell you about this story that I experienced that you may be able to pick off a little bit about it. And if that person, if they're willing to listen, which is a key component of this, if they're willing to listen, they may get, oh, okay, you're just trying to warn me. You're trying to give me some advice. And in some cases, then it's that you're not my father,
Well, so I was going to say one of your it's one of the most special talents that you have. If for some reason someone can capture the minimal amount of your attention, where you're almost intrigued, but you're like, I'll humor this for a moment, and they tell you something. Your tactic takes the light of, and because I'm a huge fan of, if you can't explain it, you don't understand it, and you do it with such authenticity, but you do it something like this, and this is I can't even say it in Bob's voice. Humor me with the specifics. And just because you say it, because it simultaneously says you will entertain me with humor of your specifics that you don't quite understand, but it also says, please explain it to me so we can both understand that you don't understand what you're saying. But let's figure out which side this is getting. Right now, it's 51-49%. But you may swear. Oh, look what you did. You wow.
So close.
But you do it with such authenticity, though, but your ability with the experience that you have to listen to someone and ask the questions that are just enough to flick that keystone for an avalanche of cerebral activity from them. That is an art. And I don't know quite how you do that. I usually do it with a large volume of
We're back to tequila again, right?
Yeah, and back self-deprecating humor, and then I slowly but surely try to get them to understand that maybe they don't understand. But you can do it with such a laser focus. It's surgical precision that you do that with, and I think it's in the guise of an authentic. Explain it to me. Just humor me with the specifics.
Well, but isn't that part of the thing? Is that if you can't, like you say, if you can't explain it, do you really understand it? And there's a difference between I'm explaining something to a peer who is equal on the technical side, and by technical, I'm not meaning high tech, whatever the profession is that is involved with this process, or I'm explaining it to a consumer of that service, or I'm explaining it to a provider of something, a supplier through the supply chain, or an outsider, or a lawyer, or a jury, whatever. Your messaging has to be specific to that audience. So you have to be able to talk about it, and you have to be able to translate to your audience, which is another topic I want to do.
It's another story for another day.
Absolutely. I think that's a good. So if you have to sum up anything that you said, because I really wasn't listening, what would be? Oh, by the way, one of the other things that I've picked up on this over the past 12 months is once somebody has explained something to you, the two words I'm using more and more, because they can be so useful, is that's adorable. There's so many ways that can be said, so many ways that can be used, so many ways it can be interpreted. It's turning into my favorite response for any explanation of anything.
I love that.
It really is great.
Gosh. Under normal circumstances, I'd come in hot, ready to challenge you to a battle of wits, but I am clearly unarmed in this, and I am reevaluating my life decisions.
Whereas I'm wishing I would have paid attention to mine.
Listen, this is a great talk. I think my summary is that if we're talking specifically about failure or generally about experiences, which encompasses in failure, I would strongly emphasize that you are who you are today. You are a sum of your previous experiences, past successes and failures. And if you remove any of them, you're not the person you are now. I would also challenge that every time you fail, you're concerned in some capacity of starting over. You're not starting over. You're starting with experience. And that experience is the most important thing that you're going to get out of this life by far. What you do with it is an entirely different story. And that leads into a multitude of other stories. But I think that's the summary of my particular understanding of the conversation.
Well, the thing that I'll add to that is also when you're talking to somebody else, don't be afraid to guide them in uncomfortable directions. Do so in a positive way, not like me, but do so in a way where you can help, because a lot of us want to ignore that learning. I want to ignore that ultimate, you got to go through it kind of process. And we can all be there and do a better job of supporting people through this, and not as if it's the end of the world.
And don't forget sometimes that you're throwing, that truth, that unfiltered truth is like throwing fastballs to a catcher and they don't have a mitt. So it may come off a little bit harder than you anticipate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool.
Bob, thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. Seriously. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Because I'd be, just talking to myself, which actually I don't have a problem doing. So it's
you talk to yourself when you need advice. You're like, well, what do you
But I tell you, I can be a jerk. And with that, I think we're done with another episode of BizTech Twist, which I actually got right. I think once or twice I've gotten the name of the podcast wrong in my wrap-up statement, but I got it right this time. So this is cool. Tony, thank you so much for joining. And for the rest of you, remember to like, subscribe, comment, put pictures of small animals as comments. That would be cool too. And remember, gerbils know more than they let on.
See you all.
So, take care.